Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Lynne County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Good day and welcome to Ethical Perspectives on the News. My name is Tabak. I will moderate today's discussion. Our topic is welcoming international students to the United States. The number of international students has risen rapidly in the last 10 or 20 years. There are now nearly 1 million students from other countries studying at colleges and universities in the United States. That's 1 million students out of about 20 million students in American colleges and universities. And we want to talk here about how we can do the most to help these students have a satisfying and successful experience in our country, and how our native-born students might benefit from interaction with these visitors from other nations. To help us with this discussion, I have the company of 3 people who all work with international students. On my left here is Lynne Ikach, who is a longtime colleague at Cornell College. Shuhui Lynne is working at the University of Iowa. And Zhang works with me also at Cornell College in our Office of Admission, and working especially with international students. So you each, I think, have some relevant experience and responsibilities, and I'd like you to say a little bit more about your current responsibilities at your own institution. So maybe we start here with you, Lynne. I know you mainly as a teacher of Russian language and literature and film and other aspects of Russian culture, but there's another side to your career that I think I know less about. So why don't you share that with our audience?
Yeah, for the last 18 years, I've been giving an English test to incoming international students in order to evaluate sort of what their language level is. All the students at Cornell College are fully admitted, so this isn't this is simply to evaluate whether we could provide some additional assistance. So I give the English test, and I help to coordinate with our services, the writing studio, tutoring services and things, to help students and provide the support that we can.
Okay, now we offer some courses as well.
Yeah, we offer a special first-year seminar that's targeted for international students, and that provides, it's a regular course, it's a full credit course, but it really helps them make that transition into courses, very intensive courses, because we have a 1 course at a time calendar, and it provides a sort of a bridge to life at Cornell College, to American culture, and that helps. And then after that, we provide additional tutoring services to students.
Okay. And Shuhui, tell us a little bit about the office at the University of Iowa, and then your role at that office at the university.
Right. So I'm actually working as a international student support and engagement coordinator. So I'm splitting my time between 2 offices. One is with international student and scholar services. So primarily working with kind of the retention effort and helping new international students transition into their life and academics at Iowa. And then the other side of the job is with the multicultural and international student support engagement, so focusing on kind of advising international student organization and kind of the involvement piece of their experience here. Okay.
And you are also from China?
Yes, I'm originally from China, and I came here for undergrad, and then I ended up staying for my master, and then staying here for work.
Okay, very good. And Ling recently, just took me to China just a few weeks ago, my first time doing that. So that was a big adventure for me, and it made me think a little bit more about how I can be more sensitive, or I can understand better the challenges students face when they come to us from another country. So tell us a little bit about your role at Cornell College.
So Ling Zhang, and I'm the Associate Director for Admission. So my main job is to recruit international students from all over the world. And of course, with the support of our wonderful faculty and staff, we have been very successful in doing that. But when you do admission work, the student build this relationship with you. So your work normally doesn't stop once they get to campus. You get to know them, and so I'm very involved in student service, especially for international students as well.
And your work involves a lot of travel. You're going to
Correct.
these other countries to talk to students where they live
Yes.
and encourage them to think about coming to join us here and study with us. Yeah. Where is your first contact, Shuhui, with international students? Do you see them when they arrive in August? Do you have any earlier contact?
Yes, so we have been doing pre-departure events in China for a couple of years.
Okay.
Until last year, and then for this year we kind of transitioned into an online format. So we are doing pre-arrival webinars. So I was able to kind of communicate with the students prior to their arrival through these webinars, and also kind of the live Q&A that we are hosting for those webinars.
So I'm wondering what kinds of anxieties students might have when they first arrive here. Do you have some engagement with just even as a volunteer, as a host for these students?
Well,
what do you hear from them?
When they, first of all, they're coming to a completely new culture. I mean, Ling knows much more about this because she's more involved with them, but I think they're nervous about things, about how it's going to be, particularly I think the language issues. It's quite a difference being surrounded by language. I mean, as a language teacher, I know how hard it is to be communicating in a target language 24/7. And so even though these students have studied quite a bit and their English is good, it still can feel, I think, really overwhelming. So my contact with them is primarily regarding the language, and so that's what I see. Sort of there's this apprehension and sort of being surrounded by the language and hearing the language 24/7. It can be a little bit of an overwhelming experience. But Ling has more direct contact through we have an international new student orientation that takes place for about 4 or 5 days prior to the regular or the main new student orientation. So our international students take place in both. So they have several days to kind of get here, to get settled, to learn about the surrounding area, get settled into their dorm rooms, and then they're able to join the other students when they come. And so I think that provides a really nice transition. So they get kind of two orientations, really. So Ling, how would you say the students?
Yeah, and I hate to put you on the spot, but so Lynne, I mean, when you first know that you're going to go to China, were you kind of nervous?
Yeah, it's like nothing I've ever done before. And then when I arrived, there were some things that seemed more familiar than I expected, but there were many things that were more different that I could not anticipate. Yeah, so I of course was well taken care of there, and it was a brief visit, and I was teaching in English, so I didn't have the same challenges as my students, but it still made me think a lot about this. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, the reason I ask you is because our international student, they wouldn't have someone, like me that will travel with them to a different country. And a lot of them, for sure, that's the first time they've traveled overseas. At Cornell College, we do offer airport pickup. So every international student who arrives, that's the first time they arrived, in Iowa, will be able to go to the airport and pick them up and bring them to the dorm to make sure, this transition is smooth. And, there are a lot of questions. I'm sure Shuhui here, will be able to give us some examples as well. They will want to know where they can go to get a grocery, where they can go to get some, nice Chinese meal, and whether they will be able to buy a bike. Do they need to bring pillow? Do they need to bring, jacket? Stuff like that. So, yeah. So, Shuhui, do you have anything you want to add?
I think it's kind of interesting that do I have to bring pillows? Seems to be a question that we actually always get. But it's kind of like, what should I bring? And then what do I have to do once I get there? And sometimes some of the smaller things that are a little unexpected to them because they didn't need to think about this when they were at home. But then they need to spend, if not, for the exchange student, it's probably just 1 year or 1 semester, but for the degree-seeking students, they're going to be here for 4 years, so they need to basically get their whole life here. So like getting a bank account, getting the phone setting up, and kind of all kind of things, and moving into the residence hall, that's just a lot of like smaller steps that they might or might not be thinking about before reality hits them.
So again, in my reading, I think that some universities around the country have struggled to find the right balance between offering special services to meet the special needs of visiting students and still giving those students the opportunity to integrate fully into the life of the university. So I know at some institutions, international students have sometimes been too separated, particularly with larger numbers. Some students are able to congregate just amongst themselves. What do you know about how our institutions have tried to address that part of the challenge?
Well, I'll start. I would say at Cornell College, we're a small college, and we have about 5% of our 5% of our students are international students. But that's a pretty small number. So we're talking about 50 students, 45, 50 students. So that's a very small number. Now, over half of our current students are from China, and the fact that they gather together and associate together, I think is good and it's normal. I mean, that's a very normal thing to do, and I think it provides support. I mean, they have one another to talk to, but there are also ways in which they're becoming involved in other campus clubs, campus organizations. We have a number of students on the cheerleading squad, for example, in the judo club. We have several clubs such as Eyes of the World, which is primarily made up of international students, but also domestic students. And they put on things like food, dinners, and performance shows. And there's a new organization, as I understand, the Chinese Experience, which you're the advisor for. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's an organization where, can you talk about what goes on
Sure.
there?
At Cornell College, I hate to say it's easier, but for lacking of a better word, I'm going to use easier, because we're a smaller school, like Lynn said, and also because our special curriculum, we have this one course at a time. So for this group of students, they're going to take, it doesn't matter whether they are international or domestic, they are going to take the same course for 18 days straight and spend 18 days with the same professor. That gives them a great advantage. So if they put all of us together in one room for 18 days, we're going to become friends. So for international students, like you said, find that balance is very important. We want to make sure they hang out with the student from the same country, so get that comfort. But also we want them to be able to interact with the domestic student. That's the reason I said at a Cornell College it's almost easier, because automatically they have that kind of a setting right away will enable them to make friends.
And they have our orientation. I just add our orientation session, the international student orientation. They group them in families, and those are, so that's our Office of Intercultural Life, and they provide a wonderful program that creates families with other students, other international students who have been here a year or two, and then the new students get paired with them, and so they kind of have this group, and they interact mostly during the orientation, but also throughout the year to some extent. And then in the regular orientation, they have a peer advocate group, and so then so the orientation, they have a group of other students, it's mixed, and so they're integrated with other domestic students, and they have this group, and they meet throughout the year. So they have sort of built-in, structured ways in which they get to know people. Whether they become best friends is up to them, but they actually have very structured opportunities to interact, both with other international students and with domestic students.
So how are you using the word family here? You mean
they create, and I quote unquote
sort of
family.
big brother
it's a
or big
student,
sister
yes,
on the
exactly,
campus.
exactly. So they create a little group in that particular group. So it's smaller. It's not all the international students, but it's a subgroup. And then they kind of get to talk with one another and just kind of have a chance to ask questions and maybe voice some problems or concerns within what feels like a very safe group, I think.
I read a blog post by a Chinese student who spoke about some of these issues, and he said that where the university had organized outings, now this was not in Iowa, but the kind of outings we might have here, we might take students on a weekend to the Amana colonies or something like this, and he said that the bus would fill up just with the international students. The purpose of the outing was to help students engage with their new American peers, and he felt frustrated that he didn't get that part of the experience. What have you seen in this way?
Right. So we actually have like organized like field trips as well
Right.
to different places, and I would say it really depends. For example, we have a program called Life in Iowa that is really helping international students to kind of getting adjusted and then to the life and academic system, and also exploring Iowa. So I would say the fee is coming from international students' fee. So I don't know how I feel about using the fee that international students pay to bring domestic students to the trip.
Oh, I see.
And because they have probably have been to some of these locations as well. So, but that is kind of the purpose of that program. But if that is another program that focusing on kind of bringing international and domestic students together, I would say that is a different story as well. So,
So far we've been talking about what we do for the students, and I wonder what we do for the rest of the community. Again, I'm thinking, I've had good relationships with my international students, but I'm thinking about what more I could do, or what more I could do to understand these students. I was telling Ling before we began recording that one of my students in particular told me this long story about his family background in Japan, and it came only in the last week. His family had come all the way from Japan to visit us, and then I learned these details of his life that had been invisible to me all that time. So I wonder if our institutions are doing enough to help the American students already here to understand and welcome their international peers. Do we do anything to?
We do. You know, like Lynn said, at Cornell College, you know, we're much smaller, so it's, you know, it's much easier to kind of get things done in a, you know, a very effective way. So we have, and because of our one course at a time, we, between the blocks, between two different courses, we have this 4 days weekend. And we have, you know, wonderful faculty and staff volunteer to take them to do things. One of the very famous trips that most of international students were very excited, and I heard a lot of good things about, you know, that trip from domestic student is our ski trip. So our head of public security, Mark, he takes students to do the ski trip, like, you know, twice a year. And that's a great, you know, event, and it's a good mixture with international student and domestic student. And like Shuhui said, I totally understand. You know, when you have a bigger institution and the fund is specifically designed for international student, it's kind of harder to bring, you know, domestic student on board. But at Cornell, you know, we have a wonderful student service. We have a, you know, a great department over there, and they will be able to provide the funding, provide the service to all international students and domestic students. And we do also at Cornell College, we have events like, you know, have a faculty or staff host a dinner for all students that want to sign up, and they will host a dinner at their house. So I think that's a great, you know, a welcoming way to, you know, whether you are domestic or international student, if Iowa is not your home, I think that's just a great way to say, you know, you're welcome here.
So Shuhui, when I was in China, you know, I had a classroom full of 60 students, and when I called upon somebody in the class, the students stood up to speak. Doesn't happen to me here in Iowa. But I was prepared for that. I had read about that beforehand. What I wasn't prepared for was I was in a group this size with just 4 or 5 people, and I called, you know, I just speaking casually like this outside of class, and my new Chinese friend stood to talk when I addressed her. So I read this must be part of the challenge as well. You can speak to this as a student. You come here and your relationship to your professor is different. Your relationship to your classmate is different.
right.
The grading or evaluation standards and methods are different. Can you speak about how we prepare these foreign visitors for a different way of learning in the United States?
Right. So I think definitely the relationship is a lot more informal here than being in China, and also a lot of different places around the world. So I would say it really depends on when the student's coming. I think for an undergrad student coming here, usually they adapt here pretty quickly, kind of being in a more informal relationship either with their classmates or their professors or staff members as well. I would say for graduate students who might have already experienced like college in their home countries and then come here later, that might be a little more challenging to kind of get into the more informal relationship. But we kind of talk about this during our orientation as well, and also kind of informal and informal way, kind of addressing these issues. And some of those, I would say, it also takes time, because I think it's a little difficult to kind of tell someone basically everything at the beginning, and they will forget about that as well. So
I think that is one of the things during an orientation. There's a lot of information we're trying to give to the to these students, to all students, domestic and international, but it's even more so, it's overwhelming. And so even though we expose them to all the services and all the great things to be done, you have to follow up, because it's just, it's sort of too much all at once. So to continue to follow up and remind people and check in with them. And Ling, I know, does a great job. I see her having lunch with the international students periodically, and I value the contact she has with them, so that I can kind of get a sense of how they're feeling about their courses, and that really helps me in my role as coordinator, because sometimes I have faculty members sort of talking to me about if they have a student who seems to be struggling, and then I can kind of follow up and talk to Ling and try to arrange some other services.
Yeah, and kind of going off to this, one of the thing that we kind of begin to do for both international and domestic students as well, is that we have a kind of online kind of orientation course that happens, takes stages to happen, and then the first few stages actually happens prior to they come to campus, so that they can get a little bit of information when they need it. And then we kind of, the course continue into the first half of the semester, that they can continue to learn about the important information as they need them. And then once they are on campus, the outreach begin. We have a lot of campus partners that will do different outreach throughout the semester and throughout the year to students. I would say the challenge is whether the students are used to asking for help and getting help. I would say a lot of the time they would kind of respond and say, "Thank you so much. I will let you know when I have a question." But if you wait until you have a question, then it becomes too late.
I was impressed reading about the University of Iowa. The Tippie School of Business has an international buddies kind of program, or kind of study buddy, which I thought was a really nice program. And we're going to be starting something like that this year, where we have some structured academic conversations. So we have peer tutors, students who've already taken the course, to be able to kind of have some academic conversations with them. And I thought, Iowa seems to be doing that, and it seems to be a successful program.
Yeah, we have like 3 buddies program from
so not just in the School of Business.
So one house in our office in ISSS, and then one house in TP College of Business. So that is kind of more related to their majors, the pairs, and then one is matching the international student with a local family.
Nice. Yeah.
So international students have become an important source of revenue for many colleges and universities, but we have other reasons for wanting to welcome them here, right? So I'd like you to comment perhaps on why students come here, and what we gain, those of us who are living in the United States, whose whole lives are in the United States, what we gain from having these students in our company for a couple of years. Have you seen some good experiences there with interactions with our American students, or things we do to help our students gain from these relationships?
Well, I think it's just such a benefit for students to have that exposure and to learn about these other places to which they may or may not travel. It's not, we have Chinese students, but we also have students from other countries. For example, I teach Russian, and we were so lucky for the past couple of years to have 2 students from Russia, and they interacted with my students, they helped tutor them, and they participated in club activities. And that's just been a really marvelous way for students to interact and build their language skills. And the same is true, I think, for some of the other students from other countries, just interacting in different ways in classes. And it just really lets our students, those interested in business, international relations, to really get to know some of the people who actually grew up in those, and get to know the cultures.
And we're in Iowa, you know. I mean, when we said that, I'm not saying it in a bad way, but a lot of the students here, they don't have access as a student from the, you know, East Coast or West Coast. So what is a better way for our student, our own domestic student, to know about the world? We said, you know, at a Cornell College, we bring the world to our, you know, to the hilltop. And it is very true, you know, the international student, not only they bring the tuition, but also, I mean, you know, the richness they bring to the community and the culture. It's just wonderful. And we have at Cornell, the one course at a time, we have a faculty that will take a group of students to study overseas. And last year, some of our business students went to China, and 2 Chinese students, actually 3 signed up for the same courses. And it went really well. And those students became like lifetime, you know, friends. And I know those domestic students, before they went on the trip, they have so many questions. And you know, they were able to just, hey, knock on the door and said, hey, tell me, what do I need to do? What should I prepare for? So I think, you know, it's just a great kind of experience for our domestic student as well.
And what a wonderful way for those international students to feel like the expert after spending time
Exactly.
here,
Yeah.
feeling sort of, you know, out of their own culture. They got to be the experts.
Yeah. I think we just need to realize that there's a culture difference, but also we're all human beings, and there are more similarity than difference in us.
So I'm sensitive as well to the fact that for many of these students, this must represent a very large sacrifice on the part of their families. The stakes for succeeding or not succeeding in the United States must be high for many of these students. An American student goes to college and stumbles, there's lots of opportunity for a second chance to do it over again. But for somebody who's traveled from around the world, that might not be the case. We're close to the end. If you want to comment on that, or if there's some other message you want our audience to know as we come to near a close on our conversation. Anything you want to add there, Shuhui?
Well, I guess for me, like having international student here, and as an former international student myself, having the opportunity to study here has been great. And then, like Lynn said, is having international students around is really a welcome to you. So kind of taking time to get to know each other and get to know the different peoples that you are able to interact on campus has been really beneficial and to broaden your horizons.
I think if we just ask one another, I mean, ask a question or two. I had wonderful interaction with some international students just asking, oh, so what cities are you from, and tell me what the weather is like there. And it was just small questions can really lead to a lot of interesting information.
Yeah.
And also in Iowa, you know, we're the state that generally are very welcoming to, you know, outsiders, and very nice to our international student. And most of the time when I ask an international student, they always say, oh, you know, I've been traveled to, you know, a different state before, but I came to Iowa, people wave at me, people smile at me, you know, people kind of, you know, like just, you know, super friendly. So I think that's a great advantage for Iowa to recruit international students as well.
Okay, thank you very much for your contributions. Today there's an important subject. There are many students among us, and many members of our audience will be seeing them. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.